life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Bern, here we are, another show, and we're very lucky to have back in the studio with us.
How's your recall?
Phil Aaron.
Got it. Yeah, wonderful. What does he do?
Well, he's been regaling us with stories of his many pursuits, but Phil has spent a number of years as a professional speaker, and he has spoken for very large companies and also does a lot of work with the family, and that was what really interested me. So I was hoping we could spend a little more time on that topic today.
Since Phil is from another part of the country, I want to take a liberty here in that he is a co-founder, initiator, if you would, of actually it's a new multi-level or network marketing concept called Touchstone. And it may be a while before it's really prominent here, so we can say that what it is, it's, I think, an educational process. In other words, a series of tapes that can be acquired on a monthly basis that teach people to do whatever they're doing a little bit better, whether they're in some other multi-level marketing and maybe short in training or maybe at their regular jobs. And so it's strictly an educational multi-level concept, which is kind of novel. I mean, and I think probably one of the purest ones right now, and that's all that they're doing. And it's such a good idea, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if others will pop up, because there's a lot of information out here. And I've never felt that we were competitors, but rather co-contributors. Because there's so much room for the things that we do. And this man does it incredibly well. I was in a seminar this last week for, 3 days, and they were intense, and they were fulfilling, and they were funny, which makes it, of course, detoxifying. You feel pretty good when it's all over. This guy has a very rubber face. I mean, he can really come up with some I don't know if we're going to be privy to any of this or not tonight, but now last week we discussed a lot of things, and just as we were ending the show, I remembered there was a story, an analogy, if you would, where he really would like his wife to make some changes. And we all want other people to change, if possible. And yet, do you remember what I'm talking about? Okay, and how you went about doing that?
Well, as far as attitudinal-wise with her, I mean, we have a tendency to want to change somebody else because it takes no effort. It's very easy to do that and to ask for that process. And I realized that the only person I could control was my attitude. But yet I knew I didn't need fixing. It was her that needed fixing, of course. And I found out a long time ago there are two different opinions. There's the right opinion, and there's the man's opinion. So I learned very quickly. And I was determined to discipline myself to make some changes towards her. And that was to be able to move more to setting my goals. I was determined to take the trash out. That was a big deal, to be able to discipline myself to do that. And we have a tendency to forget little things like that, to be able to help her, to be able to set my own personal goals, to appreciate her more. And I remember the first time, we lost a lot of romance. I see a man, when he begins dating a woman, he uses romance as a tool. I mean, he'll tell her anything. I mean, he'll lie like a dog, really. He just to get her to marry him. Give me anything. I'll give you anything your heart desires. I'll give you hot and cold running maids and poodles on the diving board and speed bumps on the road to the house. And many times he gives her prolonged poverty, which is not what she's looking for. So I realized that I had kind of oversold my situation and decided to put a little more romance back in our relationship. So I bought a bundle of flowers. And men usually buy flowers when they're dating, and they usually buy shrubbery after they're married. They consider it the same thing. And so I went to the door and rang the doorbell. I had this big grin on my face and this big bundle of flowers, and she opens the door. And we've been married about maybe 5 or 6 years, and she looks down at the flowers and looks at me and says, "Did you wreck the car again?" So I knew I had to really work on it. I knew I had to work.
And how did you do that?
Well, I had to set my goals. I had to look at what I wanted out of the relationship and begin to be the person that she wanted me to be, and begin to be moving into that. So I actually had to set goals on a regular basis for us to go out, for me to tell her that I loved her, I've seen people sit in our seminars and say, well, I told her I loved her when we got married, and I told her if it was going to change, I'd let her know.
And when she asked me, I said, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I see people at the airport. Here are these, I travel quite a bit. I've got almost 250,000 miles on my frequent flyer card. Pretty soon I'm going to get an airplane. And I see people at the airport saying bye to their loved ones and saying bye to their wife. And they'll go, okay, honey, I'm going to New York. Yeah, okay. Yeah, me too, baby. Me too. And they don't even profess their love anymore. Yeah. They've lost that focus. And
expand those. I have a specific idea in mind. It was delightful. You went to her and asked her what? And you did it a couple of 3 times. Okay, and you went to her and asked her to make a list of, what was it, 6 things that you could do. Okay.
To make her life better.
Yeah, expand on that now.
What can I do? What are 6 things that you would like to see from me, like to see me do? She had about 40, actually. She boiled it down to 6. And it was incredible because of the things that she asked me. I wanted to do things like take her out somewhere. And these were little things like take out the trash and do this and do that. There were very little things that she asked me to do.
Hug me more. That's what
she wanted more hugs. She wanted to be cuddled a little more. And I'd lost that romance end of it. See, men tend to sell. And they once they sell, it's like the dog that chased the car. And finally the car stops and the dog looks around and goes, what do I do now?
I had a dog that caught the car once and went boom, boom.
I had people that do that with women, but sometimes it's their wife. But anyway, I didn't realize that the requests that she had were to me almost insignificant. I couldn't believe that those little things like that is what she wanted. However, when my attitude was right and when my focus was right when we were dating, when I was trying to impress her, I would do those little things like that. And we had grown away from that. I had lost the romance. I had assumed the male channel changer position. And I'd sit in front of the TV, and then we lost a lot of that. So I had to humble myself a little bit to get back to those beliefs that I had in the very beginning.
As I recall, you did it 1 time, 2 times, and then the 3rd time she said, I have some things I'd like to change for you.
Yeah.
In other words, and that takes some courage.
Did she give you the list of things she was going to change, or did she ask you to give her a list?
Well, it took twice, and I asked her some of the things I could do for her because I was determined. We all had a tendency to want to change other people, so I said, let me change for her. Let me be the person she wants me to be. And it was hard because I had to accept the fact that I wasn't quite as perfect as I portrayed myself to be. So after that, then she came up to me and asked me very quietly one time, are there anything, that I could do? Well, I had about 70 or 80 things ready for her, and I had to be very subtle about it and act like let me think.
Yeah.
Golly, off the top of my head, and well, how about this? And then I kind of moved into it. And we have a tendency to get away from that, and it's just one of the things that we can do to help them, show them how we appreciate them.
You must have a pretty substantial repertoire of materials and concepts that you cover. What are some of those, and what are your favorites? Is there some that you really get?
Oh, well, obviously goals. Goals just fire me up. I had no direction in my life, and most of the people that we see in our seminars don't have goals. They don't know. They've heard them. I did a training for the Coaches Association, and they all knew to tell their people who played football, to tell their kids, you got to have goals. They never knew how to set them. They never knew how to make them specific. They never knew how to make them real. They never knew to write them down in a certain way. That's the difference between goals and daydreams. If you don't write them down and commit to them, and write them down as if they've already happened. You got to convince your subconscious mind that it's already happened. Most people don't understand that. They say, I will, I'll try, maybe so, we'll see. But they don't realize if you convince your subconscious mind it's already occurred, I have. You mentioned this when we met the other day. I have. I will. I am. Their subconscious mind can deal in that with more urgency than it maybe, or I'll try this. But what happens is when you set goals, it starts moving you to what you want. And it scares people sometimes. They don't want to. They're scared they might fail. It takes multiple goals set, one behind the other, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, 6 months, 2 years, lifetime goals.
Now, we talk a lot about the subconscious mind during the course of this show, but I think it would be really interesting to hear from you what your interpretation of the subconscious mind is and some of the things you do to get control of your subconscious mind.
Well, as we spoke earlier, affirmations are about the strongest thing you can do to take control of your thoughts. And when you have built your desire towards something that you want, then you've built it to like a white heat, and you've plugged the holes where your self-esteem leaks out through these statements that we say to ourselves with our lack of self-worth. by something constructive and set the goals up. It gives people a better focus. My subconscious mind, when I first set my first goal, it was just it was a pitiful goal. I look back on it now, and I remember how hard I struggled to earn a certain amount of money. And all I wanted to do was double my earnings. I worked for the state, and I had more week left over at the end of the money. And so I had a goal. I remember I set a goal to earn an extra $1,000 a month. And how I struggled at that, because my subconscious mind said, you're not worthy of that. Mm-hmm. You're a $20,000 a year man. You can be bought and sold all year for $20,000, which was true. I allowed somebody else to chart my destiny at what I was worth. And just because I was being paid $20,000 didn't mean I was worth that. But after working there for 10 years, I began to believe it. Mm-hmm. So I had to fight against that. And it's almost like having in the old black and white movie with the angels on one shoulder and the devils on the other. You know, the devil says, do it, nobody will know. And the angel goes, no, don't do it. I had to fight that back and forth with my self-esteem. To believe it, I was better than that. And to do that, I had to keep putting it in and keep reading it and keep imprinting it on my hand and on my brain that it was true, that it worked, that I had achieved it. So I had to convince my subconscious mind that it was mine already, that I had accomplished that. And then the tangible equivalent came in my life almost effortlessly when my subconscious mind accepted the fact.
And how did you convince your subconscious mind?
Repeating it over and over and over again. Going through affirmations, reading my goal cards, my 3x5 cards. It says, I have earned $1,000 between this date and this date. And I signed my goal card. And I put it on my mirror. And I carried it in my pocket. And I put it in my car. And I'd read it 100 times a day. And I would pull up to the stoplight and read. I could read it 10 times at a stoplight. It's the first time I ever stopped when it turned amber. Amber means in Atlanta, go.
Go, yeah.
Red means go.
Right.
And I put it in my subconscious mind. I had to fight with that because the worthiness of what I was all about was dictated to by my boss, who told me how much he was going to pay me. And that's not fair.
But people would say, Phil, yeah, but you're being paid by the state. How can you double your earnings when you're still in the same old job?
I had another job. I took another income. I looked around for another source of income.
At some point, then you had enough courage to step out. Mm-hmm. And did that come after you had read enough affirmations and had convinced yourself that you really could do that and find a job and be more successful?
That's true. Well, I never found a job from that moment on. I only employed myself. I realized that I was the best boss. It's amazing what I used to do. Listen, here's what I used to do. I worked at a job I was not appreciated, around people who didn't like me, to spend money I didn't have, for things I didn't need, to impress people I didn't know. Mm-hmm. I did it for 10 years. And I began to realize that my whole future was charted by somebody who did not care for me. And my job was as secure as my boss's attitude on Monday morning anyway. It was as secure as 2 words: you're fired. Mm-hmm. We're broke. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I realized I am in better shape charting my own course, holding my own future in my hands, than being dictated to by somebody who I felt had not grown very much over the experience over the years. So once I had grown beyond my financial situation, I had no other choice to do but to go out and, if I didn't like what I was doing, to change what I was doing.
I think it was an important part of your discussion too in purposely selecting your friends, mm-hmm. or placing yourself in a position where the right people could purposely choose you. Do you want to expand on that?
That is so important. I never chose a friend in my life for 29 years. If you worked in a cubicle next to me, after 3 days, you'd be my friend. If you moved in next to me, you would be my friend. I had a very low friend threshold. Then I began to realize that...
That's an interesting way to put it.
Well, it's true. And I began to realize that many of my friends condemned, criticized, and complained. I began to realize that they would come over to my house and just would condemn all these things and different people and then walk out, and I would feel terrible. And I began to realize that it was me giving them of substance. It was me giving them, it was me buying their meal, or they were borrowing my lawnmower or things like that, because I didn't have enough integrity and belief in myself to say, now you reciprocate. I was scared of being rejected. So if you sent me a Christmas card, I'd send you one back. I'd trade you. But I always said, I'm independent. I don't need this, I'm independent. But we need people. And when I began building my self-esteem, I began to realize I had to have a little friend surgery, because many of them were black hole relationships and never carried me where I wanted to go. And unfortunately, some of them were people I hung around with for 10 or 15 years. And we never grew beyond that. We always sat around. We always handled the same problem. No one grew beyond that. And when I tried to grow, it was like they went and pulled me back down. And they would tell me. I would tell them, I've got a goal set. I'm going to do this. And they go, you're not going to do that.
Who do you think you are? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I didn't want to disappoint them, so I said, well, I'll just stay here broke and miserable and complain like you. They go, that's great.
Well, I've heard the analogy before, if you put a bunch of lobsters in a pot, none of them will ever get out because they'll keep pulling each other back down.
I had lobster marks on me for 10 years. I never got out. But I didn't want to disappoint. Understand that my life for 29 years was lived for other people. My life for 29 years was lived to be an employee, was lived to be somebody else that worked for somebody else. And when I began growing beyond that, I realized that I could trust myself a lot better than I could trust other people.
How long have you been free of the capitalist system? In other words, how long have you been an entrepreneur on your own payroll?
I've been unemployable for probably about 15 years
15
now.
years.
Yeah. So I don't think anybody will have me now. I have too much fun. I'm a real threat for serious people. They really worry about me.
There is a challenge with that. Once you break free and succeed, you can't go back. They won't have you.
Okay,
You have a social circle out here, a social circle that includes the professional circle, but it's in the social circle. You know, I mean, doctors and lawyers and CPAs and what have you, and then you've got the mechanics and plumbers and what have you. And if someone breaks loose of that and gets into entrepreneuring, into sales, or into the arts, you know, like if a big person becomes a musician or a painter or something, they can never come back because they know that you won't stay. Having been free, having had a taste of that, you might come back out of desperation and survival, but when you start to work hard like they'll demand of you, you know, punching the clock and being there all day, that you'll soon realize, gee, if I was doing this for myself, I could really be free, and they know you're going to leave again. It's really fascinating. And so there is a risk in stepping out because you're not going to get back if you're successful. And you don't want to step out and not be successful. I mean, there's no question there's a challenge there.
But
they
don't you
won't let
think
you back.
anytime you step out, you do grow beyond where you were before and you don't really want to go back?
No. No, it's not always true. A lot of
Really?
people will venture out there because they're so pain-ridden, so frustrated, so aggravated, and been put upon by inappropriate bosses and limited incomes and what have you, that I've seen a lot of people venture out there, but were not prepared. I mean, and they ran out of time and money and energy before they got ready, and they had to scoot back. Now, oftentimes they'll take you back if you failed. I'm saying the person gets out there and makes it, distinguishes themselves, then it's hard to get back because they know you'll leave again.
But I guess
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, would you want to go back if you come out and you're successful and you find
if you're
that
successful, you'd not want to.
additional freedom and you have a deeper, more profound sense of who you are and what you can be?
There are those who have been very successful out here, and I've encountered numbers of them in my career, who, because of a legislative stroke of a pen or maybe a noble but false decision, they lost it. I mean, it didn't take long to lose it. And they struggle for a while trying to recapture it, and they try to get back. But they're always incredibly unhappy. You know what I mean? But they somehow can't muster up the new courage to do it again. The subconscious mind has been fortified. It says, see, you know what I mean? See, you know, just get sensible here and go get a job. And so a lot of them will surrender and do that. But boy, it's bitter.
There's nothing more pitiful than a man that's given up or a woman that's been out there and given up because
Tough
they're,
employees too.
yeah, I call them day zombies because they just go through the day. They don't,
Yeah.
you know, they're just making it to the next paycheck. And I think a little of us have that in us. And I've seen people to go out as an entrepreneurial flavor and not be organized and think it's going to be roses. I call it the ready, shoot, aim philosophy. They get out there and find out that it's a little more difficult than they think. And but you're right. Another thing too, Bern, is that many times a person that's been independent holds people to a higher level than they did when they were an employee. I know that I never expected a whole lot from the people who supervised me, and now if that was the case, I would expect, if you're going to lead me, you better have your act together now.
Right.
Because
Or
I know
else
what
I'm
it's
not
gonna
gonna
take.
follow.
You got it. You got it. I know what it's going to take.
I know better.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of what we do, and I know that what you do, Phil, will support these people if they'll just expose themselves. Whether they're fresh out into the world or whether they've had to retreat and come back, don't stop being curious. Don't stop learning, because there's new things really emerging all the time that could make that difference, to light that spark again. Because you still have the same capacity. It's just understanding that your subconscious mind has grasped the status quo and said, I don't want to let go again. And there is a way through that. One of the things, in addition to affirmations, that we talk an awful lot about, do you remember? Is confirmations. And I was soliciting the people in your life to confirm what you're affirming over and over and over again. And it's hard to get them to do it. It's hard to get them to do it. And we have had some extraordinary results by people making their own confirmation cassette tape with their own voice, because the subconscious mind doesn't know it's your voice. It doesn't know. And so it will be supported in your affirmation. So there's two pathways, two channels into that subconscious.
However,
And then the proclamations that we talked about.
I was going to say, as parents, as bosses, as partners, we can do that. We can
confirm people.
Do the confirming.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
If you're just willing to let go and confirm and applaud and uplift and support. I've had grown men cry, and I bet you have too. Grown men cry when I said, make a short list of, say, 6 people who support you, who applaud you, who confirm you. And they couldn't name a one.
I would imagine very few people could.
Yeah, it's just tragic. As a lot of it is because it hasn't been solicited, or in some cases when it was offered, it was poo-pooed.
That's true.
You know, they say, oh, are you? You know what I mean? And so we need to really recognize the power that can come from surrounding ourselves from people who will follow the script we give them for their own best interest. Because if we succeed, they have a better chance. And but there's too little of that. Too little of that. And then the proclamation, the written third-party statement, I find is incredibly powerful. We've had some case histories back 30 years ago where a young woman, just a statement of proclamation, third-party commentary, that was in concert with what normally we'd call an affirmation, but reading it over and over and over and over again had incredible breakthroughs. I mean, measurable things. And so there's all kinds of ways to influence that nasty little mind that wants to stay little if it's alive. It's really, I think we have to put it in its proper perspective about what that subconscious is about. And I was trying to think some of the other things that you were getting into on the seminar too. I know you talked a lot about affirmations. In the goal thing, for the sake of the viewing audiences, how many goals should a person have?
Oh gosh, we put a goal wheel together and divided it up into 5 major goals. And one being financial, one being relationship, one being physical, and then spiritual. And we worked them all together as a wheel. And what happens is we get everybody to measure those and how that relates with each other. We got them to set it up and to do that. And what happens is we've seen people have great financial goals and their relationships are gone.
I remember that. Didn't it go something like this? In other words, this was what? Financial?
Financial.
And this was?
Physical.
Physical.
Spiritual.
Spiritual.
Mental.
Mental.
And physical.
Seemed to me there was another one. Then you had gradients along here.
1 to 10.
Yeah.
And what we ask them to do is to take their, for example, take their financial and take it from 1 to 10 and put a little dot where they thought they would be. 10 obviously being totally financially secure, and 1 meaning that if you quit your job within 30 days, someone's going to come to your house and ask for your stuff back. So that's what we did. We went on with a relationship of where they were married and where they were at this point. We went over to the physical and where they are as far as to how that works. And we just carried it around with each one of them, also with an emphasis on the spiritual. And that didn't mean religion, that meant spiritual, where you are spiritually as far as your growth. And how, where we at? We got physical.
Physical,
mental.
Spiritual.
Mental's okay.
Mental.
Okay.
And I remember that the people in the audience kind of put a mark where they thought they were in some of these. And then we had them draw something in a form of a circle, kind of this way, and that gave you a kind of an image of what your life was like.
So in other words,
compared to what it could
this
be.
person will need to focus on here to bring this out first.
Uh-huh.
And we've seen people who made a perfect circle in around the very center of it were almost in denial, or they were on their case really. They were down on ones on everything. And then some of the people who had a perfect circle out all the way around the outside were the ones in denial, thinking they were okay.
Yeah, if you're out here, you're not probably.
And I see it. I've
looking
seen
at
it.
yourself.
I've seen
Have
people look me dead in the eyes and round that up. And I had a guy one time sit there and did one like that and said, you know, my 5th wife would really need to have this course. And I took everything I had to say, oh, really? This is good.
Oh, and you had other ones too. They had other circles that were strictly
for example,
all...
you can expand. Once you start there, you can expand it out. For example, take a physical goal and go from strength training to aerobics training to walking to nutritional, and then you can take a spiritual goal and a relationship goal. You can open it up, do 5 more spokes on that. For example, a relationship goal could be dating, communications. Did you know the biggest statement a woman would say to a man is the biggest statement that scares him? The biggest statement that gives her a catharsis is the biggest statement that scares him.
And what is that?
Honey, we have to talk. And he said, we talked last month. Do we have to talk again? And it's a process of letting a man understand that once a woman just verbalizes what her problems is for her, they're half solved. But a man has to fix it. So he has to worry about having to fix it. So communications is a very big one there. So each one of those can be broken down. And in fact, I'm working on one that has about 26 legs on it now. Each one means something else in my life. So you can begin to divide it up. But we felt these were the basic 5 ones that people work on. And then once they get a handle on that, they can move on. So in other words, I could have spiritual goals for the week, a weekly spiritual goal. I could have a weekly financial goal. I could have a weekly relationship goal. So you see how it begins to multiply. And you write them all down, and once you begin putting them down on 3x5 cards, you see how they all begin to relate. And I've seen people that would spike at a financial goal and be right at the very top, and yet on some relationship goals be right in here. Yeah. So you have to be all rounded. You know, many people, especially in marketing, talk about financial goals. Well, there's a lot more to it. I mean, why don't you look at everything and begin to expand it as far as they're connected, and begin to expand them all out together.
One of the most successful young men I've met in the last half decade, when asked why. You know, it was a constant examination of himself, and that's really what you're doing here. You're finding ways to take a careful look and say, okay, now what can I do about it? It's really fascinating. Time is fleeted, you know, once again, you know, right by, and we're going to have to start winding it down. Life Talk. Let's see, we've got to do this again. Life Talk. And, you know, I don't know if we mentioned this, but this whole show for nearly 2 years has been about life and living and making a living and sometimes loving. You know, really getting into some of these things. And we like to have people call, and we'll send them tickets to free concerts, or, you know, we'll work with them in any way at all if they have questions. I had several calls this week from the show where people really probing, looking for answers, and they're out there. But you can call 1-800-661-3490 if you're across the country. And if you're here in the 916 area, you can just call 366-8749, and we can either visit with you personally or give us your address, and, you know, we can write, or it's any way that we can do to make a contribution in this process. And that's what it's really been about. Meanwhile, this is Phil Aaron, and you're a partner to
Touchstone International
and Carl Watts. And my name is Bern
Moses.
So I have her here to say my name because I can't. And her name is Gina Fitt. And we appreciate her. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.